This is John Gilroy from the Federal Tech Podcast.
This is Sarah Mazer from Launch Darkly.
Today, we're going to talk about software delivery for the federal government. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Sarah Mazer, Federal CTO at a company called Launch Darkly. And we're going to talk about all kinds of things involving risk management, segmenting software, modernizing your software, continuous delivery. But before we dive into these fascinating concepts, I want to talk about what we're doing here. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are recording this from the floor of the AWS Summit in Washington, D.C. It has like 10,000 people floating around the convention center here. It really is a lot. Yesterday, Sarah gave a presentation, and today we are going to base our questions on the presentation she gave and maybe some of the feedback she got yesterday. Find out all about software development and risk management. Before we begin, could you give us maybe a thumbnail sketch of the company, how long it's been around, and how it can help our govies?
Yeah, Launch Darkly's been around since 2014. We are the pioneers of something called feature management, which allows you to control the functionality of your application without having to deploy any new code. We're used all across the U.S. government right now, and my talk was around how you can use it for not only front-end applications, but back-end use cases such as migrations.
So if I have a program, Gilroy software, and there's different characteristics of the features, what you're able to do is turn off and turn on different features of that application program? Is that what you can do?
Yes, without even deploying any new code.
Wow. I think if you put this in perspective, what we have here is we have a world of today is not enough. It's got to be continuous. We've got to have continuous development, continuous modernization, continuous iteration. And so the goal is, I'm sure if you looked at this, I have a survey here by MITRE for chief data officers, and they talk about continuous integration. Now, that's a good theory, but how do you do it in practice? You know, what's the practical aspect of it? So what I think you guys are is you're like, continuous integration in work boots. You allow it to happen, don't you?
Right. Yeah, so if you think about CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery, we're on the CD part of things. So we enable that end delivery point in the CI/CD process. So we better enable CD and trunk-based development.
In the federal government, you have citizen-facing sites. I'm thinking like national parks or recreation.gov. And then you have internal sites of people exchanging code and modernizing code within there. And when I was doing my research on your company, Launch Darkly, it seems that you're a pretty good fit in both of those, huh?
Right, yep.
The example most people use is recreation.gov. How did you help them?
So recreation.gov uses Launch Darkly to roll out things that are related to park permitting, as an example, for campsites such as Yosemite, also for controlling certain notifications to the public at a park-by-park basis. And so there's really many different government agencies that are all affiliated with the recreation.gov website, but they all can work together using a common framework and rolling out features together as one unit with Launch Darkly.
So this is almost a COVID story. So before COVID, many people would have registered online, but COVID forced them to register online. The problem that they had was that they couldn't do an on-off switch, do it all in one day. And so what your company allowed them to do is do it in a more gradual process.
Right. In the time of the pandemic, agencies were already very stressed with fewer resources, and they had to deal with a lot of last-minute executive orders or orders in which they had to close down a park at a last-minute's notice. And so there's a lot of reactivity and thrash that the development teams would have had to face if they didn't use something like Launch Darkly. They would have to do a redeploy every time they had a park notification or a park closure. Instead, they were able to be more agile by turning off and on access to park permits using feature management.
I do a podcast on satellites in space, and when I first saw your company name, Launch Darkly, I thought it had something to do with satellites in space. Nothing. So what does Launch Darkly have to do with software releases?
So Launch Darkly is actually a pun where you can launch features in the dark. And so that's another use case that agencies are using Launch Darkly for. One of the examples is if you think about healthcare.gov, and Medicare.gov are using Launch Darkly in the customer-facing or public-facing websites. And the cool thing is that they are launching features actually working in production, and they know they're working in production before they roll it out to the rest of the public. So they've kind of dark launched the application, but they just control the rules of who is seeing what until they're ready to roll things out. So like the next year Medicare's plans, for example, people can log in as fake beneficiaries and see things working in a production environment. So it's not like when open enrollment starts or the new plan years for Medicare start, there's no big development team at midnight pushing out a big release and hoping for the best. They actually know it's working and know it's working in production.
My generation would do these massive 2-year projects and then release it and have nothing but headaches. And then all of a sudden, it was called a waterfall technique, and it may have worked for maybe physical manufacturing, but it's pretty hard for software development because you can't anticipate the dependencies. You can't anticipate what's going to happen with different situations. And so what your organization allows a federal agency to do is just kind of maybe try 5% or 10% or 15% or a certain amount of the features, and then instead of assuming they're all going to work, it's easier to take it chunk by chunk by chunk. Is that right?
Yes, you can do it many different ways. So you can do progressive delivery, which in Launch Darkly terms, we like to think of it as first-year testing and production with just developers seeing something work. And then maybe you're going to roll it out to your QA team. Then maybe your beta testers. And then maybe in the case of government, you might give access to a few states that you work with as kind of a larger beta test before then you roll it out to the public. But you can also consider all of the anonymous users that are going to your web applications and then route, say, 10% of the traffic to a new feature, 20, and look at the load and performance of your system and gradually crank that up until everybody has access to this new component.
Yeah, it seems hard to believe. Now, outward-facing sites like recreation.gov, we understand, but there's a lot going on behind closed doors in the federal government. There's a lot of migration taking place. It's possible that there may be some outdated systems the federal government uses, maybe mainframes, and so similar product, different from the outside facing to the inside facing. So you can take the same approach when you migrate a database. You're not going to have 10 million people watching, but you'll have important people watching. And so when you migrate from an older system, a legacy system, you can do it in a gradual manner as well. Is that right?
Right. So if you think about targeting, which I'm describing as that dark launching, I'm targeting on individuals that may have authenticated, so I have maybe their email address. But feature management doesn't have to be Booleans where you're targeting people. You can target anything. You can target a device. You can target by IP addresses. You can target by operating systems or anything. And what you target to is also variable. So it doesn't have to be on-off of a web component. It could actually be you're migrating to a new database component. So if you have database A and database B, those are strings that could be just a variation inside a feature flag. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, but instead of just looking at on-off of something, you can have strings, numerical values, or even JSON as a variation of a feature, and you'll pass in different strings, like database A is a string, database name B is a string, and you can make switchovers from one to another using a feature flag, just like you can doing things on the front end.
So you call it toggling when you move back, is that right?
Yep.
So if you test out one database and you notice there's an issue, you can toggle back to the original one and fix it and then try it again.
Right. So in my demo yesterday, we did a database migration, and there was a oops because you migrated to a new database, but the API wasn't ready to handle the new database. And so what we did is just toggled the feature back off, and that mitigated the incident immediately. And all this is done without any new code deploys.
That's amazing. You used the phrase feature flag. I'm sure that people are wondering, what's a feature flag? So what exactly is that?
So a feature flag is the same thing as a feature toggle, which is all part of the whole feature management platform that we provide. What that really means is that your application is connected to LaunchDarkly, which is an external rules engine, and you're wrapping whatever feature, whatever you want to turn on or off or control, with a feature flag. And it's just a conditional statement that you're using to then reach out and communicate with LaunchDarkly, and we're going to say yes, no, show or not show the feature.
So here you are at the AWS conference, and you're probably one of the leading sponsors here. So why AWS and why this conference? I mean, is this your sweet spot here, the people at this conference?
Yeah, we're a global sponsor here, and that's quite neat for someone in my role because we are still a startup company, and to be able to have that engagement with AWS and that momentum here is just really great to see. We have worked really, really hard to get that relationship with AWS, and we're on a forward momentum. We're really excited. We had a lot of people come to our booth. AWS conferences are a big deal to us, especially me as the federal CTO, and being in D.C., their public sector conference, but we had half the team in London because their London event is happening this week as well. But we run on AWS as well, so we use that internally. So we just have a great relationship with them.
But it's not only AWS. There's all kinds of integration options available with your service, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, even though internally we are AWS, we connect to any application running anywhere. So it could certainly be an Azure application, on-prem application, or another cloud. So we're a black box to the applications. They're just going to get back the rule evaluations from us.
I've interviewed many people in the cybersecurity world, and they say shift left. We're going to not bolt it on. It's going to be, we're going to bake it in. And so is this part of the whole shift left movement of looking at the software before it's released, or is that the inappropriate term for this?
Yeah, and shift left can mean a lot of things, but when you think about feature management and being able to kind of shift the responsibility up the chain to more of the application layer, for example, that adds value because it reduces complexity and being able to make changes on the back end. It allows people and the application to make the decisions on who gets what feature, which is, I think, where it should be made.
Well, I sent a secret agent to your house last night, and he captured your outline of your presentation. I have it in front of me, a real secret agent. And you talk about future-proofing. So what the heck's future-proofing?
Well, it just means that in the example that I mentioned with CMS, they're actually seeing an application work in production before the public. And so they know it's already working, and they've essentially proofed it for the future because it's already there.
See. Yeah, that's good. Now, is this mostly focused on databases or everything?
Anything, any application. On-prem, in the cloud, it could be a back-end application such as a database migration. It could be on the front end, controlling features shown or hidden on a website for certain people. We have, in the commercial sector, we have a fast food chain that uses feature management as an example to control menu items. So if you live in the South, you might see more things on the menu than in the North. And so all of that is controlled through feature management. There's a lot of different use cases.
One of my neighbors owns a company in town called Accela. His name is Jeff Gallimore, and he participates in DevSecOps events all the time. And I'm looking at you going, we should plug her into the next DevSec, because that's exactly where you fit in. That's the hand in glove for you.
Yeah, actually, I know Jeff. and we will be a sponsor at DevOps Days DC.
Right, you know Jeff,
yes,
huh? Yeah.
I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a real character. In fact, the last time we did a podcast interview with Jeff, we were at a barbecue place, and we asked about his secret sauce. So the feature flag is your secret sauce?
It is. Yeah.
Good. So when you look at the federal government and the transition that's going in place now, where do you see the next 5 years heading?
Well, I think that we're going to see application development certainly accelerate, especially with tools like ChatGPT and how fast the developers can actually complete projects now. So we are on that trend with them in terms of speeding up application development. And it's very exciting to see what will happen in the next 5 years.
Mandatory question, ChatGPT question. People ask me, I'm sure they're going to ask you. From my humble perspective, I can see artificial intelligence helping developers make fewer mistakes and doing things quicker. As far as writing screenplays or writing music, I don't see that happening. But I think it's a real practical tool right now when people are getting pressed to do this continuous development. So what do you think the role of ChatGPT is in your company and maybe the next 5 years for the federal government?
So I think from a developer's perspective, it's just going to make development much easier. You can quickly build a website without writing any code with ChatGPT already. So if you want to do a quick proof of concept, you can spin something up really easily. I would say pretty soon, if you wanted to add in feature management to that website, that would be automated process at some point in the future as well. I think it'll be interesting to see as companies start to understand more about ChatGPT, though, about intellectual property concerns, security concerns. So we'll see where it all goes in the next few years. But I think in terms of just speeding up the pace of software delivery, it's no turning back.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. So is artificial intelligence part and parcel of what your future is for LaunchDarkly?
So I would say that we don't necessarily use artificial intelligence as everybody knows it within the application itself. We do have some analytics capabilities in terms of A/B testing. So you can do split tests of 50% of the people see one thing, 50% see another, and we do the metric checking. So if you see two pieces of text each next to a button, like click me or click here, 50% see one thing, 50% see the other. Which one clicks more buttons? And so we do that analysis on the metrics and tying that to a feature flag, and that's Bayesian statistics and predictive analytics. So that's as far as we get as a company right now in terms of AI type of things. But we are looking at exploring ways to bring in AI to our technology for sure.
When I think of progressive delivery, I think of testing dependencies and then toggling back if there's a problem. Testing out integration, come back. I never thought of actually testing out user experience. I mean, this is what you're doing. It's what you're talking. And so it's quite possible that you roll out 10% and no one clicked on the orange button. Okay, come back. It's almost like marketing or responding to a consumer experience, isn't it? I mean, and it's almost a perfect tool for it because that's what an A/B test is. When A/B tests would have everyone get it and then make a decision, but you can progressively A/B. There's the application, huh?
Right.
Progressive delivery of a marketing test or UI/UX test.
Right. Actually, I'm not going to name the name of the company, but I used to work at a company that did marketing A/B tests, and this is the exact same thing, except you can not only test on the front end. With LaunchDarkly, you can test back on things. So you could actually do an A/B test on different database algorithms and the performance impact of that, or routing traffic two different ways and looking at which one has, the best infrastructure impact. And so your metric can be a numerical value. It could be performance measure, or it could be, say, memory usage, and tying A/B feature trade-offs to numerical values is something that the marketing companies actually don't do. So even though the company I came from is very well known in the marketing side of A/B tests, they don't do A/B tests on back-end infrastructure at all. And that's a clear advantage of where we are in supporting developers.
And in this town, there's an executive order that talks about improving user experience, isn't it? We all know the EO, and it says, well, how can we do this in terms of software? I never thought of, progressive delivery as being responding to the executive order to increase user experience for the website, but in fact isn't it?
It's exactly that. So going back to the pandemic, if you look at healthcare.gov, there was open enrollment that was then extended because of the pandemic. And there's a feature flag, essentially, regarding open enrollment that they use. And so that feature flag had to be on longer And then they turned it off for a period of time, and then they started it up again. It was called SEP, or Special Enrollment Period, and then they turned it off. And so they're reacting very, very quickly to last-minute executive orders on a skeleton team without having to redeploy any new code at all. They're just using feature toggles to change things and access to healthcare coverage.
Rather than staying up till midnight with a team of developers and trying to figure this all out. I mean, you couldn't anyway during COVID because everyone's from their homes. It's almost a perfect tool at the perfect time. Well, that's fascinating. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Sarah Mazer, Federal CTO at Launch Darkly.
This is Doug Hudson from Orca Security. Please listen to episode number 79 on the Federal Tech Podcast. We'll show you the difference between a secret agent and agentless cloud security.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.